They didn't hear the bomb drop, only the absence that followed. The old television in the corner flickered with cartoon static mid-sentence, as if the world had forgotten how to speak. A haze of plastered dust curled around Amina's fingers as she gripped the edge of the overturned table, pulling herself upright. She didn't scream, not when the ceiling cracked open, not when the air was sucked from the room like the house had inhaled in horror, not even now, with a ringing in her ears so thick it might have been silence. She was 17, not quite a girl, not yet a martyr. Her younger brother, Sammy, had been mid-laugh, a joke about a cat with a limp. His voice still hung in a memory like a dangling light bulb. She found him buried beneath a curtain of drywall, blinking, dazed but alive. Amina brushed debris from his hair, fingers trembling. "You're okay," she said, though she wasn't sure she meant for him or herself. The apartment complex was unrecognizable. Hallways sliced open the sky, rooms folded like paper. The neighbor's balcony now leaned against their kitchen. Somewhere above them, Mrs. Halim was screaming her husband's name into the rubble. Amina stepped outside barefoot, avoiding the broken glass with the strange poise of someone who had done this before. She wasn't surprised. That was the terrifying part. 3 blocks away, a boy she barely knew was already live-streaming. His phone angled carefully, capturing the plume of smoke rising like a question into the dawn sky. "You bombed us," he said to the lens, grinning. "Adorable." The comments rolled in before the sirens could catch up. Laughing emojis, a sea of flags, memes with dancing skeletons captioned "Freedom Delivery Service." Someone stitched a video with slow jazz and made it trend. They called it resilience. But it was never that simple. At the school-turned-shelter, people gathered like spilled marbles. Amina watched them in lines for water, scrolling on cracked phones, searching for someone to blame. Sammy clung to her sleeve, eyes following every sudden movement, flinching at every cough that echoed too loudly. The foreign journalists arrived by noon, flocking like pigeons with boom mics and practiced sympathy. Amina hated the way they looked at her, the way grief made her visible. One woman with a French accent asked her to repeat what she felt. Amina gave her a wordless look, a blank slate for someone else to write their narrative on. That night, with her back against a crumbling wall, Amina typed a message into her phone's notes app. "You think we are your backdrop. You think your bombs are the climax of our story. But you are mistaken. You are the joke. We are the punchline." She didn't post it. Not yet. The world outside continued, dispassionately. Markets reopened. A minister in a clean suit denied the strike ever happened. Across the sea, a politician called it necessary deterrence. Sammy drew a picture of their cat with wings. Amina pinned it to the shelter wall. People laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt illegal to cry again. She met the boy from the live stream 3 days later. His name was Nabil. He wore a red hoodie and carried his phone like a weapon. "You're the girl from the balcony?" he asked. "No," she said. "That balcony doesn't exist anymore." They sat on broken steps and watched the drone hover, like a vulture in the sky. Nabil pointed at it. "It's always there, watching." Then we watched back. He looked at her, curious. "You mean film them?" "No, I mean live." It was a declaration, not a request. Something unspoken passed between them, fragile and electric. They didn't talk much after that, but when she posted her first video, standing beside the shattered library, holding Sammy's winged cat drawing like a protest sign, Nabil shared with a caption, "You bombed us? Adorable. Watch this." Within hours, it was everywhere. Some saw irony. Others saw courage. A few mocked her accent, dissected her face, speculated on whether she was real or staged. But the story didn't belong to the analysts. It belonged to the scorched streets, the laughter that survived inside ruins, the rhythm of the people who refused to speak in past tense. And as the sun dipped below the haze, painting gold across the wreckage, Amina whispered into her phone, "This is not your tragedy. This is our beginning." She hit record. The smell of iron hung in the air long after the fires died. It coated the inside of Amina's nose like rusted breath, a reminder that even survival had a scent. The school-turned shelter buzzed with too many bodies and too little space. And yet, within that chaos, routines began to take root. Children drew on walls with coal from burned-out buildings. Women gathered in corners, trading silence for soup. Old men argued over news that none of them believed. Amina moved through it all like a ghost becoming flesh again. Nabil hadn't stopped filming since the first blast. He prowled the streets by day, charging his phone off battered car batteries, uploading clips that somehow made the war feel less suffocating. His voice, always off camera, was becoming strangely familiar to strangers around the world. They knew him as the boy in red. They didn't know that he hadn't taken the hoodie off because it was the only thing he had left from his brother. "We should talk to her," he said one morning, pointing discreetly to an old woman near the school's entrance. Her name was Safia. She wore a dark blue scarf and smoked like the war owed her answers. "She's not a fan of cameras," Amina replied. "That's why I want her," he said. "Everyone's performing. She's the only one telling the truth." They approached carefully. The woman didn't look up from her cigarette, but she noticed him anyway. "You want to feel me crying?" she asked, her voice like gravel under a boot. "No," Amina said before Nabil could answer. "We want to remember you." That gave her pause. "I don't want to be remembered," she said. "I want to be left alone." But later that night, she told Amina stories, not at a camera, just into the dark, of the first war she lived through, of a son taken at a checkpoint, of how she still boiled 2 cups of tea every morning, just in case he came back. "Is that hope?" Amina asked. "No," Safia said. "It's habit." Amina wrote it down, not for the internet, but for herself. Sammy had started speaking again. At first it was only to her, in whispers and half-finished sentences. But eventually he opened up to the others, especially Nabil, who treated him like a partner in mischief. Together, they created a comic strip, drawn on cardboard scraps, about a superhero pigeon who dropped ink bombs on politicians. It became wildly popular inside the shelter. The pages passed around like sacred texts. Laughter returned, quietly at first, then with stubborn force. Even amid the rations and airstrikes, there were moments that didn't feel borrowed. Amina found herself smiling without guilt. One afternoon, while searching for a solar charger in a rubble of a bookstore, she uncovered a battered copy of a poetry collection. Most of the pages were torn, but one line stuck. "They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds." She shared it with Nabil, who read it twice, then added it to the closing frame of their next video. The world latched onto it like a prayer. A local news anchor in a suit quoted it, not knowing it had been smuggled out of Flatton Library by a girl with dust in her hair. That night, their video was flagged for graphic content. The platform blurred Amina's face and silenced the soundtrack. They appealed the decision. The video stayed muted. "Even silence is censored," she said. Nabil didn't answer. He was staring at his phone, jaw tight. "What is it?" she asked. They hit the radio tower. The shelter fell into disarray again. Calls dropped, connections severed. But it wasn't just the communications that died. For Amina, it was something deeper. A cord of fragile belief suddenly snapped. They'd thought if they told their story loud enough, someone would listen, would act. But now, with the signal gone, it felt like yelling into a sealed box. "We were never talking to the world," she said to Nabil. "We were talking to ourselves, just louder." He stood, paced once, then threw his phone across the room. It hit the wall and split open. Sammy flinched. "Don't do that," Amina said sharply, pulling her brother close. "Don't break the one thing we have left." Nabil picked up the pieces in silence. Later, he taped the phone together with strips from the comic. The days that followed dragged like wounded animals. Drones circled without striking, a kind of psychological warfare they'd come to recognize. There was no schedule to death anymore. It arrived unannounced, or not at all, which was somehow worse. One morning, a convoy of aid workers arrived. They handed out powdered milk and toothpaste with the efficiency of people who didn't plan to stay. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes and a plastic smile, approached Amina. "You're the girl from the videos," she said. "You're very brave." Amina nodded, offered a thin smile, and said nothing. After the woman left, Nabil whispered, "They always call us brave. That way they don't have to call us victims." She knew he was right. That night, Safia passed away in her sleep. No one cried, not because they didn't care, but because there was a kind of dignity in letting her go without spectacle. Amina folded her scarf carefully and placed it in a box of items meant to survive. Drawings, memory cards, fragments of paper with words that still mattered. "Are we just documenting the end?" she asked Nabil quietly. He looked up from his repaired phone. "Maybe, but if we vanish, they'll rewrite it for us." In the weeks that followed, Amina's tone changed. Her voice, once tremulous, became sharp. The videos were no longer reactive. They were declarations. She no longer begged for help. She dared the world to look away. The comment sections grew toxic and tribal, filled with theories and denials. But somewhere between the hatred and praise, a thread of understanding formed. Amina wasn't just a girl in a war zone. She was a protagonist, not of tragedy, but of something else, something still being written. One night, as the shelter settled into uneasy quiet, she turned to Nabil and said, "We're not seeds." He raised an eyebrow. "No, we're roots. Bombs can't reach that deep." He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes told her everything. And from somewhere deep inside the cracked walls of their lives, hope stirred. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to keep going. There was a shift, not loud, not sudden, but felt like the moment the tide changes direction beneath your feet. You're still standing in the same water, but it begins pulling back, reclaiming what you thought was stable. That was how Amina felt the first time someone stitched her video with their own. A girl in Mexico, standing on a rooftop, her voice trembling as she echoed Amina's words into her own skyline. Then another in South Africa and one more in Jakarta. Not pity, not performance. Just mirrors held up from across oceans. Her voice was no longer trapped in crumbling walls. It was ricocheting, amplified in corners of the world she had never seen. But it was a message from a hacker collective that truly altered everything. The screen of Nabil's phone glitched one morning while they were editing footage from a food distribution line. Static, then black. A few seconds later, a message appeared. "We see you. We hear you. Keep speaking." No sender. No location. Just that. Nabil didn't trust it. "Could be a trap," he said, voice low. Amina, however, stared at the words like they were coordinates to something greater. "Or it's an echo," she said. "Ours. Coming back to us." That day, they uploaded a new video. Not from the shelter, not from the rubble, but from the abandoned radio station, the one bombed weeks ago. The camera wobbled as Amina walked into the broken control room, sunlight slicing through collapsed beams. She placed a cracked microphone in front of her and sat in the center like she was hosting a show for ghosts. "This isn't a broadcast," she said. "It's an answer." Her voice, calm but charged, carried the weight of 1,000 quiet mornings. She spoke of dust and noise, of children learning to count by counting explosions. She spoke not to the enemy, not to the savior, but to the forgotten, the ones watching in silence, too afraid or too far to speak. She called them by name even if she didn't know them, because the point wasn't precision. It was recognition. Within a day, it was translated into 13 languages. Within a week, the station was reclaimed. Symbolically, at least, people returned with batteries, wires, makeshift panels. Artists painted murals on the soot-streaked walls. Pigeons with microphones. Trees growing from sound waves. It became less of a building and more of an idea. They renamed it Echo Tower. Nabil filmed everything. But he began to change, too. His edits grew sharper, his focus more intense. He barely spoke during filming, letting the silence speak where words failed. One night, while Amina dozed beside Sammy, he stayed up watching the raw footage from the first day they met. He paused on her face, blood smeared, eyes wide, and whispered she was already stronger than any headline. He never told her he said that. Outside the tower, resistance took new forms. Not bullets, not barricades, but projection. Amina's voice was mapped onto buildings in Berlin, One of Sammy's comics appeared on a billboard in Toronto with no signature, just a caption. "You bombed us? Adorable." The irony had become a weapon. But not everyone celebrated. There were smears, coordinated discrediting campaigns, crisis actors, staged ruins, foreign propaganda. A viral video dissected the way Amina blinked, claiming it was a trained performance cue. "You're becoming dangerous." A volunteer told her one morning as they handed out notebooks to children. Amina didn't look up. "I hope so." In response to the backlash, they released a 3-minute clip. Amina, Nabil, and Sammy sitting in a destroyed classroom, reading hate comments aloud. They laughed through some, sat in silence through others. But at the end, Amina looked directly into the camera. "If I scare you more than the people dropping bombs, maybe the problem isn't me." It broke 1 million views in 2 hours. The platform took it down in 3. From that moment on, they stopped chasing visibility and started chasing clarity. They realized truth didn't need permission to exist. It just needed witnesses. They began archiving stories, not just theirs. Amina interviewed a teenager who danced in his sleep to forget the sound of drones. Nabil filmed a mother baking bread in a crater because her kitchen was gone. Sammy narrated animations based on the dreams of displaced children. Every story felt urgent, like it was fighting against erasure. But the most powerful came from someone they hadn't expected. One evening, as dusk swallowed the last of the sky, a man approached the tower, mid-30s, face half-shadowed by Kafia. He stood for a long time outside, as if deciding whether to enter a memory or a mistake. "I used to work here," he said finally. They let him in. He ran his fingers along the rusted equipment, like a pianist remembering a long-abandoned instrument. "I was a producer," he said. "Before all this, I aired music, comedy, nothing political." "And they still hit you," Nabil said. He nodded. "That's the joke, isn't it? You don't need to say anything dangerous to be silenced. You just have to speak." He stayed 3 days, helped fix a transmitter, showed them how to reroute power from solar cells. Before he left, he handed Amina a flash drive. "Record everything," he said. "Not for today. For after." The weight of it felt heavier than a weapon. That night, while Sammy slept curled beside the humming generator and Nabil edited in silence, Amina held the flash drive in her palm and thought of her mother's voice. How it used to fill the apartment with lullabies during power cuts. How even back then, they learned to sing in the dark. "We're building something," she whispered. Not to herself, not to the room, but to the future. And somewhere out there, in a world that still wasn't listening closely enough, the signal pulsed steady. The cold came early that year, sharper than usual. It crept into the cracks of Echo Tower and curled beneath blankets like an unwelcome whisper. The makeshift studio's warmth, once sustained by noise and movement, now relied on stubborn hope and an unreliable generator. Amina layered clothes donated from 4 different countries, none of them warm enough. Still, she kept filming. Sammy's cough had returned. At first it was soft, the kind children fake to avoid chores. But then came the fever, dry lips, long nights where he shivered in her arms despite every layer she wrapped him in. She didn't tell Nabil. Not at first. He was already stretched thin, managing footage and dodging new surveillance tech rumored to be deployed in the area. They both worked like time owed them something. The airstrike that hit the waterline changed everything. It wasn't the explosion, though that was violent, flattening half a neighborhood before breakfast. It was a consequence. No water. None to drink clean or cool burning skin. Aid couldn't get through. Pipes were twisted like veins of a dying creature. And Sammy's fever climbed, indifferent to the politics that had caused it. Amina went silent. No videos. No posts. No messages. Just quiet. Nabil noticed first. Of course. He knocked gently on her door in the tower, waited for a reply, then opened it anyway. She sat curled around Sammy's sleeping body, wiping sweat from his brow with the edge of a scarf. "I need medicine," she said without looking up. "Real medicine. Not herbs. Not prayers. Not platitudes." He said nothing. He just left and didn't return for almost 2 days. When he did, he was bruised and limping, his red hoodie gone. He carried a small bag, antibiotics, fever reducers, and a tiny tin of vitamin powder. Amina stared at him. Where? I asked the wrong people the right way, he muttered. Don't make me explain. She didn't. She just took the medicine and held it like it might dissolve in her hands. Sammy's fever broke that night. He mumbled about pigeons and bread and flying over walls. When he finally slept peacefully, Amina sat beside him, eyes wide, unmoving, as if scared to blink in case the world punished her for this one mercy. The next morning, she recorded again. No script, no makeup, no metaphor, just her voice hollow and direct. You celebrate our survival like it's entertainment. You treat our strength like it justifies your silence. But strength is not consent. Survival is not gratitude. We bleed quietly so your feed stay beautiful. It went viral again. But this time, it didn't feel like a victory. Amina began to pull away from the movement, though no one knew. She still recorded, still posted, but there was a distance now. Her smile, when it came, never reached her eyes. Nabil saw it, but didn't confront her. He just worked harder, as if his edits could reverse entropy. Then, one morning, a soldier entered Echo Tower. Not a drone, not a shadow from the sky. A man, boots, uniform, alone. He didn't raise a weapon. He didn't threaten. He simply stood in the entrance and looked around, his expression unreadable. Is this where the girl speaks? He asked. Amina stepped forward, spine stiff. Yes, this is where she speaks. He looked at her like someone trying to reconcile myth with reality. My daughter watched you, he said, every day. She didn't speak. She started filming her school, her neighbors. Then one day, he trailed off, eyes glassy. One day, she tried to interview a checkpoint. Amina exhaled slowly. I'm sorry. He nodded. Me too. Then he left. That evening, Amina walked to the rooftop, where the signal was strongest. She sat alone, letting the wind claw at her clothes, letting the night press down on her shoulders. For the first time since the first bomb, she cried. Not loudly, not beautifully, just honestly. And when the tears stopped, when her breath steadied, she pulled out her notebook, the one she'd started in the shelter, filled with quotes and fragments and unfinished lines. She tore out a page, wrote 3 lines, and brought them to Nabil. He read them, then looked up, blinking hard. You sure? She nodded. It's time. The final video was different. It wasn't polished. It wasn't dramatic. It was a montage. Faces, voices, laughter, fury, rubble, pigeons, chalk drawings, poems, silence. It ended with Sammy, holding his comic book, pointing to a drawing of a superhero pigeon soaring above the city. His voiceover said, They can't shoot what they can't reach. Then Amina's voice, quiet but firm. This is not our ending. This is our echo. The screen faded to black. No hashtags. No music. No credits. It wasn't meant to go viral. It was meant to endure. 3 days later, the tower was hit. Not flattened, just enough to silence it. The studio gone. The archive scattered. Dust swallowed the frequency. They never found a transmitter. But the flash drive remained, buried in a steel box beneath the floorboard. And long after the dust settled, after the feeds moved on and the noise migrated to other tragedies, someone found it. They uploaded the files. One video, then another, then all of them. And Amina's voice, recorded under Rubble, whispered once again, You bombed us? Adorable. Watch this.